Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from round 1 of this year's Norway chess. It's Praggnanandhaa versus Alireza Firouzja, and sorry about misinforming you in the previous video. I said that the players bid for time in Armageddon when in fact it's always black with 7 minutes on the clock, white with 10 minutes on the clock. Of course white has to win, as in every Armageddon. No idea why I thought they bid, but I did trick you guys in the previous video, so apologies for that. Now let's check it out. All of the 3 games in round 1 ended in a draw. The classical section and all the 3 games went into Armageddon. Hikaru defeated Fabiano in Armageddon, and now let's check out what happened in this one. So it's Pragg versus Alireza. We can even check out the final position. This is what happened in the classical. In the classical, this is the final position. Alireza with the bishop, Pragg with the knight. Pragg gave a check on c7, and we had a repetition here. So not a lot of action in classical. That's why now we head into Armageddon. So Pragg with the white pieces opens with pawn to d4, pawn to d5 by Alireza, and now knight to f3. Already a deviation from the classical game. Knight f3, knight f6. We have c3, c6, and now queen to c2, and here we have the immediate knight to e4, and it is now already as of move 4 that we have a completely new game. So Alireza trying to be very tricky right from the start. g3, Pragg prepares the fianchetto, the light square bishop. h6, we have pawn to c4, challenging the knight a little bit as it puts pressure on the d5 pawn, and the bishop to f5, threatening some nasty discoveries like knight captures on g3 would be very nice. So queen to b3 attacks b7, and queen to b6, defending while offering a queen trade. We have pawn to c5, attacking the black queen here, and pay attention to this c5 pawn. It will be somewhat of a useful pawn throughout the game. Queen captures on b3, a captures, and knight to a6, getting the knight to c7, and then of course where the action takes him. We have bishop to d2, knight captures right away. We have king captures. You could capture with the knight, obviously. Pragg decides to get the king into the game. Knight to c7, and now knight to c3. We have pawn to g5 and pawn to e3. Bishop to g7, we have pawn to b4. At some point you might execute b5. You do have support from the knight and the bishop. So pawn to a6, stopping that, and bishop to d3. Challenging the bishop, and Alireza decides to keep the bishops in the game. You could also consider trading, of course. You have the black pieces, a draw is enough for you, but he keeps the tension. Bishop g4, we have knight e5, and now he gives up his dark square bishop for the strong knight on e5. We have bishop captures, d captures, and the Alireza castles queen side. We have knight to e2, and the knight will now come to d4, but Alireza decides to give up the bishop for knight. So bishop captures, king captures was played, and now, well, yeah, there are a couple of moves you could consider. So, for example, pawn to e6. You just close the position completely, and then, like in the previous games that we've covered, you will have to worry about some advances, like maybe g4, f4, h4, but it should be manageable. However, Alireza played pawn to f6 here. And okay, Pragg captured, e captures, pawn to h4, we have king to b8, and now h captures on g5. H captures, and now the problem for Alireza is that well, Pragg's king is just much closer to these pawns than the black king is to, let's say, these pawns, and it's impossible for the black king to reach those pawns, whereas the white king really only needs 3 moves, and if the rooks get traded off the board, that's game over. You're not going to be able to defend. So Alireza needs to create some sort of a wall here to fend off the white king. We have king f3, knight to e6, king g4, and now knight to g7. And this is a great setup for Alireza. You can see that the pawn and the knight here are nicely controlling the white king. There's no way for the white king to advance. However, rook a to d1, we have rook d to f8, and now bishop to f5. Of course, inviting knight captures, you would really love the king on f5, but just rook to e8. Alireza says, you're not breaking through here, so that means that I win, as a draw is the same as a victory for me. But bishop to g6 attacks the rook. We have rook e to f8, and now rook captures on h8. Rook captures, and even though Alireza still controls all of these squares, Pragg finds pawn to e4. And the problem is now you either allow the capture and the winning of the pawn, or you capture and then allow the rook to come to d7. And that would be pretty bad. For example, captures rook to d7, attacks the knight, and once the knight leaves, you have king f5, or if you defend, then you just win material by force. So after pawn to e4, rook to d8, the only playable move for Alireza, now comes rook to d3. Pragg just goes the other way. King to c7, now of course preparing to capture. Now the rook is not hanging, and rook to f3. And you could capture, but it really does nothing. So pawn to d4. Alireza creates a passed pawn of his own, and now it seems a bit tricky. Do you allow pawn to d3 to be pushed? Do you block it with the rook? Surely Pragg would not play all of these moves with the rook, just move the rook back to block the pawn. So he goes rook captures on f6, d3, and now rook to f7 check. King to b8, and now this is the position. Alireza already has a passed pawn on d3. Your passed pawn is still on e4, so you need 4 more moves in order for that pawn to become a queen, if it can become a queen at all. What do you play here? Feel free to pause the video and try to find the only winning move for Pragg while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not being greedy. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to e5. That's the only move that wins, and I'm sure you guys have realized why. As long as the pawn is on e4, there's no way to guard the d1 square. There's a king on g4, so you don't have bishop to h5, and you need to play e5 in order to be able to play bishop to c2. That's what Pragg found. So pawn to e5 was played, and now the problem is if you play d2, even if you win the bishop, remember the knight on g7 is still hanging. So let's say d1 queen, you take rook captures, and now rook captures on g7. You're up too much material. You're going to win the g5 pawn, the e pawn marches forward. This will be completely winning for Pragg. So Alireza plays knight to e6. Now the knight is not hanging on g7, and he's ready to execute the said maneuver, but now king to f5 goes after the knight here, knight to d4 check, and now king to f6. And the problem is now the d3 pawn is hanging. You would love to play something like g3 and knight to f3 to prevent some bishop to h5 moves, but there's just no way to do it. The pawn is hanging. So pawn to d2, and now Pragg just plays bishop to h5, guards the d1 square, and you don't really care about anything here. Alireza went rook to h8. You can see that both of them were in incredible time pressure. They're just playing an increment basically, and now bishop to g4, and it was in this position on move 38 that Alireza Firouzja resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The d1 square is covered. The knight is controlled also by the bishop here. There's just no good way to play this. The e-pawn marches forward, and if we try something, let's say you go rook to e8, maybe if e6 is played, maybe you can just capture it, and then if bishop captures, you get the pawn to become a queen, but it doesn't work. Just rook e7 or rook d7 is sufficient for a win. You just go after the knight. Once the knight moves, you play e6, and now after, let's say, knight to c7, you will play king to f7, attack the rook, and now once d1 queen is played, because that's your only counterplay, you will simply capture it, and you don't care about the e6 pawn hanging, because if the knight captures, the rook is hanging, and if the rook captures, you just take the rook with the bishop, and again you are completely winning. So it was a nice game by both of them, but the problem is Alireza played too much for a draw, like Magnus did against Ding. Only Alireza's position was not completely solid like Magnus's position was. There were still problems. Pragg was able to spot those problems, and Alireza made that little mistake, and Pragg took the game. Now, it's not all that bad because this is not a winning classical, so you don't get the full points. So these are the standings after round 1. So you can see Magnus, Hikaru, and Pragg have a point and a half each, and the Caruana, Ding, and Alireza have 1 point in total, as they have drawn their games in classical. So yeah, I mean it's a victory, but not a great as great as a classical victory. So someone who gets a lot of points in Armageddon, and if someone gets like 2 victories in classical, those 2 victories in classical, of course, are worth much more. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's only round 1. Maybe round 2 will be all victories in classical. Who knows? Who knows what will happen? So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Pragg. As usual, we are expecting great things from him. I would like to thank Dot Peng Su, Scott Madison, Emir Zechic, Barry Gerald Larking, and Christopher Drake for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to cover Norway chess until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.